It's a fast-paced start to this week's edition of AEW Dynamite. It's best friends against Kip Sabian and Miro that open the show. The stipulation being, if Kip and Miro can win, then it's Miro that goes on to Revolution in just 2 weeks' time to face Orange Cassidy for his TNT Championship. And it is Kip and Miro that go over. They pick up the win in 11:38. It's Miro that pins Chuck Taylor after a bullplex. It's Kip Sabian that was a weak link. He was struggling to keep up with everyone else's in-ring performance, but we did get a really solid 65 rating for this opening match of Dynamite. A huge Dynamite as well. Got lots planned as we head into our next segment. After winning their match, Miro stands stock still in the ring, full of aggression. He is now the number one contender for the TNT title. Kip Sabian is on the outside and begins to brawl with Trent Beretta and Chuck Taylor, the best friends, with Penelope Ford slapping Trent right across his mush. Orange Cassidy then slides into the ring behind Miro, who was nowhere to be seen last week, spins him around. Both men are forehead to forehead. Miro pushes him away. Orange bounces back with an orange punch. Miro was still on his feet. Cassidy hits a few more. How is Miro still standing? As he goes in for one more, Miro nails him with the Mashka kick. Stomps on his back and locks in game over. After a while, Miro lets go, looks down at Cassidy, picks up the TNT title and lays it across him, saying, "See you at Revolution." So try as he might, Orange Cassidy, he just can't seem to get the better of Miro. And it's, the odds are certainly stacked against him in that TNT title match at Revolution in 2 weeks. We then head to the commentary desk. JR opens things by saying, so Miro will face Orange Cassidy for the TNT title in 2 weeks at Revolution. What a great way to kick off this week's episode of Dynamite. Thanks for joining us, folks. Last week, Cody announced his schedule is clear and he's ready to go on a campaign to end CM Punk and his Culture Shock faction. He beat Cole Anderson, but after the match, he was almost savagely attacked by Gallows and Anderson, if not for Shinsuke Nakamura. That brings us to tonight's main event, Cody Nakamura against the Good Brothers. Also tonight, we get women's action as number one contender Dr. Britt Baker takes on former AEW Women's Champion Hikaru Shida. And how can we forget, Kenny Omega returned last week right down the middle of an epic showdown between the three, Death Triangle, and the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley. We'll be hearing from him. Well, let's take you now to the Young Bucks as they prepare for their World Tag Team Championship number one contender ladder match against SCU. So we get 59 for this segment. So let's head to the Young Bucks. We're backstage with Marvez, who goes on to say, with me at this time, the Young Bucks, Matt, Nick, at Revolution in just a few weeks' time, you will take on SCU in a ladder match. The winners being number one contenders for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. How are you both feeling? And how are you preparing? We feel just great, Marvez. Look, a few weeks ago, us and SCU put on a great tag team match, and no doubt, this ladder match will be another classic. We live and breathe these type of matches. When was the last time you saw Scorpio and Frankie in one? Yeah, and also, they may have been the first AEW Tag Team Champions, but come on, if not for a simple mistake against Private Party, we all know we would have won that tournament. Which is why we are more determined than ever to make sure this time the gold comes home where it belongs. Then walking into shot, Matt and Jeff Hardys. It's like an old family reunion. Both teams wishing each other good luck ahead of their matches at Revolution. So Nick and Jeff struggling without a script, but we get a great 70 segment rating for this as the Hardys meeting up with the Young Bucks yet again. Wow. Well, anyway, tonight's show looks like this. We've got Janela and Warhorse teaming up to take on Team Taz. Dr. Britt Baker will take on the former AEW Women's Champion in women's action. And also, we saw him return to AEW last week. Kenny Omega is here, and he is going to speak. And before the show started, Tony Khan booked this match, Jeff Hardy in singles action against Maxwell Jacob Freeman. And the big main event this evening, Cody teams up with Shinsuke Nakamura to take on the Good Brothers of Culture Shock. as Team Taz make their way out to the ring for the next match. Joey Janela attacks EC3 from behind with a kendo stick. He's relentless. He's not holding back. They both disappear off through the crowd, brawling. It's absolute chaos. It's always chaos every week here on Dynamite. Taz decides to follow as Ricky Starks gets ready to take on Warhorse in singles action. Don't usually like doing that. It's like booking on the fly. But we are going to turn this one into a singles match. It was supposed to be tag team. But I felt as though having Janela attack with that hardcore sort of style, it adds a bit more to the story. It kind of fleshes it out, I find. But it's a terrible match between Warhorse and Ricky Starks. I was kind of expecting that, which is why I only had it last 6 minutes and 15. Warhorse picking up the win with a quick roll-up. Warhorse with a 37, Starks with a 38 in-ring performance. Yeah, it wasn't... I mean, it's not a good follow-up match, is it? After quite a decent start to Dynamite with the best friends against Kip and Miro getting a 26 there. As Warhorse celebrates in the ring, we cut to the outside of the arena where Joey Janela is still brawling with EC3. Taz is screaming for EC3 to take advantage, to beat his ass. They fight out into the parking lot. A car races towards them. EC3 dodges, but Janela gets taken out, up and over the car. It's bone crunching. Brian Cage steps out from behind the wheel with a smirk on his face. Team Taz back to full strength as they stand over Joey Janela. So a segment rating of 65 there. Janela, is he okay? Will he still be able to stand? Will he still be able to compete after Cage runs him down? Unbelievable. We then go to the back. We see MJF walking on his phone saying, "Listen, War Dog, you best be here before the show is over. Otherwise, we're going to have to think twice about your contract." And also, he stops as he walks past Darby Allin, who's sat in a dark corner. Darby glances up at MJF. He just laughs and carries on. So we're playing on this whole debacle with Wardlow's contract. Is it up? Is it coming to an end with MJF? We'll just have to wait and see. And maybe a few little subtle hints towards another feud. In a bout that didn't have much heat and terrible wrestling, Dr. Britt Baker goes over former AEW Women's Champion Hikaru Shida in 12 minutes 9 by pinfall. It's a 31 rated match. It did cool the crowd a little as well, which is really disappointing to see. It do seem as though we're getting this quite a bit at the moment. But both performers putting in a great performance there with the 41. After the match, Dr. Britt Baker calls for a mic and says, poor little Toni Storm isn't here tonight because of what happened last week. She may not even make it in 2 weeks for Revolution. So I just say, hand me the women's title and let me be the rightful owner and face of the women's division. Before she can carry on, Brandy Rhodes heads out and says, "Britt, enough. What you did to Toni Storm last week was inexcusable. 2 wrongs don't make a right, and frankly, this has gone on far too long and somebody is going to get hurt. Hey, I'm just looking out for the women's division. For the next 2 weeks, both of you will not touch one another. In doing so, the match at Revolution will be called off." Britt Baker is stood in the ring with disgust as Dynamite goes to an ad break. So we get 48 there. Remember, Brandy Rhodes now taking full control of the women's division, so she has every right stepping in and sharing her thoughts. As we come back from the ad break, Kenny Omega makes his cleaner entrance wearing his aviators. He picks up a mic on his way into the ring and goes on to say, "I don't want to take up much of your time, so I'll just get right down to business. Marks, there's a lot of people after that title of yours, and as of now, I'm putting my name in the hat. Now, in 2 weeks, you put that title on the line against Paige. Now, I know Paige. I know him very well. I mean, we were a successful tag team for over a year. I also know he can't beat you, which will then lead to the question, who can beat you? Well, just announced before I came out here by Tony Khan. After Revolution, we will be having AEW's first ever World Championship title Eliminator Tournament. The brackets will be revealed and you bet my name will be there. The best bout machine is back and ready to claim what is his. It's been a little too long for my liking since I had gold around my waist. Kenny Omega continues. Now with that out of the way, I'd like to lay down a challenge, me and Moxley against the Lucha Brothers. How about it, Mox? Wherever you are. The enemy of my enemy is my friend and all that. Let's say next week. With that said, I bid you all adieu. Kenny drops the mic and leaves as we see the three, Hangman Page, Dax and Cash, backstage watching on a monitor. Page looks at Dax and Cash and shrugs with a smirk. Big announcements then. So after Revolution we will have an 8-man world title eliminator, and next week it'll be Mox and Omega versus the current AEW World Tag Team Champions, the Lucha Brothers. Should be an instant classic, that tag team match next week on Dynamite. Quite a lot of history between those two. It's the Lucha Brothers that won the tag titles off Kenny Omega and Page, so I've got my fingers crossed for that. The camera quickly cuts to backstage. The Butcher and the Blade are beating down Jungle Boy and Marco Stunt. It's a quick, brutal assault, and Eddie Kingston, who debuted last week, is directing traffic saying, "That's it, boys, that's it. That's more like it. More aggression." Butcher picks Marco up and slams him into some roller shutters. Eddie Kingston says, "Enough. They've had enough. Come on." They leave as Jurassic Express are left hurting. No sign whatsoever of Luchasaurus as we get 47 for that segment rating. As it already seems, Eddie Kingston getting the Butcher and the Blade ticking over just nicely. Up next, MJF. His music hits as he makes his way to the ring for the next match of the evening. He's set to take on Jeff Hardy in their first ever meeting. Should be an interesting one, see how we do with that. MJF is noticeably without Wardlow, who has failed to turn up, but Darby Allin is seen sat up in the rafters watching. So it seems at the moment Darby Allin may be stalking MJF. We're not too sure, as this segment gets a 74. Two of the best, youngest talents here in AEW. And that match between Jeff Hardy and MJF ends in defeat for Jeff Hardy. It's MJF that picks up the win after 15 minutes after a quick cradle. And we almost made a 70 there. This match getting the crowd buzzing, so that's really good to see. We did have Matt Hardy at ringside. I had it set to steal the show also. But Jeff Hardy with the 62, MJF. So much potential. It's unreal. 68 in-ring performance there. As we roll into our next segment. After losing to MJF, Jeff Hardy is joined in the ring by his brother Matt Hardy, who consoles him about his loss. Then Lance Archer's music hits. Everybody dies. And he storms out to the ring looking menacing, ready for action. But instead of stepping in, he places both hands down on the apron and sneers at the Hardys. Then slowly backs away, still laughing and pointing at his wrist, just like Jake the Snake the other week. The Murder Hawk Monster playing mind games with the Hardys. It's just a matter of time, right? Between these three do battle at Revolution inside of a steel cage. Wow. So we get 66 for that. I do feel as though this Revolution card is coming together just nicely. Chris Jericho walks into the Inner Circle locker room where Sammy Guevara, Jeff Cobb, Santana and Ortiz are sat and says, "Look, last week Jeff made me realise things need to change with the Inner Circle. We need to do something big. I'm with you, Jeff. You're right, the Inner Circle haven't really done all that much lately. A month or so ago we walked through backstage saying, 'Inner Circle are back,' and we never followed that up. That changes next week as we're having an Inner Circle town hall meeting." Going to play on what actually happened in real life when MJF was wanting to join the Inner Circle. Cobb, Santana and Ortiz look at one another thinking, "Really?" Whereas Sammy is nodding along and says, "Chris, that sounds like a fantastic idea." Jericho has a smile on his face and leaves the locker room as Sammy tries convincing everyone else it's a good idea. So next week on Dynamite, it will be the Inner Circle Town Hall meeting. My own take on things, as maybe cracks are starting to appear in the inner circle. Hopefully that's not the case. You guys will just have to stay tuned to find out, as we got a 64 from this segment rating. Wasn't expecting too much as we roll into our main event of the evening between Cody Shinsuke against the Good Brothers of Culture Shock. And in about that great heat, good wrestling, Cody and Shinsuke Nakamura defeats the Good Brothers in 19 minutes 31 when Cody pinned Carl Anderson yet again. But in this tag team match, after a beautiful disaster, Cody carried the match in terms of in-ring performance, and we got a huge 82, one of our better matches in the series. And as you just saw, I did book Carl Anderson to eat the pin from Cody. Once again, we've got to keep Cody strong as we move in to our final segment of the evening. After that big main event, after the match, the fight continues. The ref calling for the bell. It's ringing continuously. Cody is hammering away at Dark Allows. Shinsuke Nakamura trading fists with Carl Anderson. Brody King makes his way to the ring with a steel chair and hammers it across the back of Nakamura, taking him out of the fight. It becomes a 3-on-1 against Cody, and he doesn't realise it until he turns around and finds Nakamura laid out and Brody standing there with a chair. King blasts him across the head with a sickening thud of bone, meat and steel. Cody begins to bleed. CM Punk then starts to walk out, clapping his hands in appreciation. He gets into the ring and stoops down to Cody, laying in his own blood. Punk gets Gallows and Anderson to place Cody onto his shoulders. GTS! GTS to Cody, who is out cold. Dynamite ends with Culture Shock standing tall over a bloody Cody. So great segment there to end this week's edition of AEW Dynamite. The performance of Cody was fantastic. Everyone doing really well in this segment, and obviously having someone like CM Punk involved certainly helped matters. So I'm hoping this is quite a decent show. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. Let's go and see how we've got on with our show rating. Last week we scored a 76. This week we score a 74, so we're just down slightly. Not too bad. Overall, not a bad show. I enjoyed putting that one together. Not my favourite show that I've done, but I'm really happy with the way that the main event turned out. Although those two matches, the women's match and Warhorse and Ricky Starks, was a bit disappointing. But yeah, overall, a decent show, as we are now just two more Dynamites out from our next pay-per-view, which is Revolution. Let's go and see how we've done against NXT. So this week we scored a 74 show rating. Not too worried about TV ratings anymore. Again, seeing as we got dropped by ITV4, but on TNT we got 804,000 viewers tuning in. Let's see if we've beaten NXT in show quality, and we have, but only just, as they scored a 73. So there we have it. That is it for this week's episode of AEW Dynamite. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you all very soon. Just 2 more Dynamites to go before AEW Revolution. Thanks for watching.